something that will help restore consciousness to its original pure state.
What got you interested in all of this, Michael? Something must have got you to wake up a long time ago and say, I'm going to devote my career to this.
Well, yes. I mean, that happened to me back in the late 1960s. When I was in my early 20s, I was a student at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. It was a time of great troubles for this country. I remember seeing the Capitol burning after the assassination of Martin Luther King, the 82nd Airborne Division coming in to take over, and it was also the time of an anti-war movement, just like there's something like that now. It was a very, very difficult time, and I just decided I wanted to take myself out of the whole situation. I wanted to, because I'd heard, I was hearing people on this side of the political question saying one thing, people on the other side of the political question saying another, and I just thought, I just want to see what I think myself. I want to find truth myself. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go search around the world, and I'm going to see what I can find that makes sense to me. So I began a little bit of a journey of self-discovery. It first took me to Iceland, and then to Europe, and then I went to the Middle East. I spent some time in Israel. Then I went through some of the Middle Eastern countries like Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan. I made a pretty big search during that period, and I found what made sense to me was the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. I came in contact with the teachings of one of the gurus from India, Bhaktivedanta Swami, who was one of the teachers of George Harrison, for example. And through him, I became interested in these historical questions. I began looking at these ancient Sanskrit writings, and I found, okay, they describe human civilizations that existed millions of years ago in the past, going right back to the very beginning of the history of life on Earth.
It is amazing.
And then I looked at something, it's not just in those ancient Sanskrit writings. I began to see, well, the same thing is in the Bible, it's in the Koran, it's in the Egyptian writings, the Romans, the Greeks, practically all the people who have ever existed on this planet, except for us today, have believed that humans have been around since the beginning, and that we came ultimately from some spiritual level of reality, from some higher level of the cosmos. So I began to think, well, if what all these ancient wisdom traditions down through history have been saying is true, there should be some physical evidence to support it. So that's what got me looking into the history of archaeology, and that's when I began to find out, well, there is physical evidence to support this idea of extreme human antiquity. And then, of course, I also began researching the question, well, if we didn't come from matter, as we're now being told, where did we come from? So that. Of course, one thing is, there are a lot of different ways to find out about these things. One thing is to actually engage in the spiritual disciplines themselves, because you can get knowledge that way. And that's what I did. I found something that worked for me. I found a system of meditation that worked for me. I've been practicing it for over 30 years. But some people, at first, the way the world is set up today, they're very reluctant, to perhaps to take up something like that themselves. They want to know, what does science have to say about these questions? So for people like that, I decided, okay, well, let me see what science says about these questions. Let's see if science admits the existence of a subtle mind element that can act in ways that we can't explain by our current laws of physics. Of course, if you look in the current textbooks of physics, you're not going to find anything like that. But I decided, okay, well, let me look into the whole history of physics. I looked, for example, at Pierre and Marie Curie. who are very famous physicists. They were husband and wife. They lived at the early part of the 20th century.
Nobel Prize winners.
They got Nobel Prizes for discovering radium and doing all the early research on radioactivity and everything like that. They're mentioned in every physics textbook. What you don't find mentioned in the physics textbook is that they were heavily involved in psychical research.
Huh.
They were part of a group of 20 prominent European scientists who were doing this research in Paris early in the 20th century. And the group included 5 Nobel Prize winners, including the Curies, and they were doing experiments with mediums. Like they did 2 years of experiments with an Italian medium named Eusapia Palladino. And these experiments were not taking place in somebody's dark living room, which is the usual stereotype, you know. Mm-hmm. These experiments took place in scientific research institutions in Paris, like the Psychology Institute in Paris, and on one occasion, Marie Curie was controlling this woman's hands. Other scientists were holding her feet, completely controlling her. And in the middle of the laboratory room, Pierre Curie, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, at a large table was floating in the middle of the air. He was timing how long it was floating in the air, measuring how high it was floating off the floor, about 3 feet. And, it's just absolutely amazing. After 2 years of experiments, the whole group of scientists signed documents saying these things are absolutely true. Pierre Curie wrote letters to his prominent physicist friends saying these things are absolutely true. We have to take them into account, if we're going to have a complete picture of reality. But you're never going to see that mentioned in your high school physics textbook, in your college physics textbook. And this kind of research is going on even today. Robert John, who was head of the engineering department at Princeton University, started doing experiments with random number generators. Mm-hmm. And, the random number generator is a machine, a computer-like machine that will generate an output of zeros
and ones. That's right.
He found students would sit in front of these machines. He would ask them to get them to produce more ones than zeros. They were actually able to do it just by their mental intention.
They could spike it. Michael, stay with us. An hour is gone. We'll be back with more on Coast to Coast.